Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to unpack a frankly mind-bending perspective on the modern world from philosopher Byung-Chul Han, specifically focusing on his crucial book, The Burnout Society. We're going to explore his central thesis about the psychological trap of modern exhaustion, and look at how our relentless pursuit of endless productivity has fundamentally rewired our minds.
So let's start with the great paradox of our modern lives. If we're so incredibly free, why are we always so exhausted? Think about it. We live in an era of unprecedented personal freedom. We don't have dictators breathing down our necks or visible oppressors forcing us into backbreaking physical labor from dawn to dusk. On paper, we are free, and yet we're constantly running on empty. We are just perpetually, bone-tiringly exhausted.
Han provides a really profound and honestly kind of a gut punch answer to that paradox. Modern exhaustion isn't about working long hours for some tyrannical boss anymore. Instead, we've fallen into a systemic psychological trap of self-optimization. You're not lazy, and you aren't just tired. The reality is, you are your own slave driver, trapped in this endless loop of voluntary self-exploitation.
To understand this, let's define what Han calls the entrepreneur of the self. In our current culture, we willingly manage our own lives, our physical bodies, and our minds exactly like a corporate product. We're constantly told to invest in our human capital, right? We track our sleep, we optimize our diets, we carefully curate our LinkedIn profiles, and we treat literally every waking moment as a chance for self-improvement. We are the CEO, the middle manager, and the exhausted factory worker of our very own life.
Now, the genius and really the danger of this system lies in its pure efficiency. Because look, when an external boss exploits you, you can see it. You can unionize, you can protest, you can rebel against them. But when you exploit yourself, it deceptively feels like self-realization. Auto-exploitation is infinitely more efficient because it arrives wearing the mask of freedom. The early stages of this burnout actually feel like euphoria, until, of course, you inevitably collapse.
Let's look at how we got here. Part 1. The paradigm shift from should to can.
For a long time, we relied on philosopher Michel Foucault's model of the disciplinary society. That was a society built on external control. Think prisons, hospitals, strict rules, and visible walls. But Han argues that we've completely moved past this. We now live in an achievement society. The physical walls are gone. Instead, we're governed by invisible, internal chains forged out of endless positivity and this constant demand to optimize. This shift fundamentally alters the very vocabulary of power. The old disciplinary society operated on the negativity of prohibition. Its language was, you must, or you should not. It was all about obedience. But the achievement society, it operates on the limitless potential of positivity. Its slogan is, yes, you can. And honestly, this is a brilliant mechanism of control. By replacing the external must with an empowering can, resistance becomes practically impossible. Because how do you rebel against your own potential? You can't.
And this perfectly illustrates the human cost of that shift. In a disciplinary society governed by strict rules, the people who didn't fit in were labeled as criminals or madmen. But in our achievement society, where anything is supposedly possible if you just grind hard enough, the consequence of failing shifts entirely inward. The outcasts of today aren't criminals, they are depressives and quote-unquote losers who are just consumed by internal shame, guilt, and a profound sense of personal inadequacy.
Which brings us to part 2, the violence of positivity.
It sounds weird to say, but too much positivity actually acts as a form of violence. We are constantly, relentlessly bombarded with messages telling us that we have no limits, that we can be anything, do anything, achieve absolutely anything. But this systematic aggression, brilliantly disguised as empowerment, completely short-circuits our natural human limitations. It literally overheats the soul.
Han points out something fascinating here. Every era has its signature afflictions. In the past, humanity faced immunological threats, infections from external viruses or bacteria invading the body. But today's crises are fundamentally different. Conditions like depression, ADHD, and burnout syndrome are what Han calls neuronal illnesses. They aren't infections from some outside enemy. They are infarctions caused by internal overheating. It's the psychic system just totally short-circuiting under the sheer, crushing weight of endless possibility. Just consider the psychological weight of this quote. The modern individual is unable to measure up and is tired of having to become himself. In an achievement society, you don't get to just exist. You have to constantly produce your identity, market your personal brand, and continuously outdo your own past achievements.
Depression, seen through this lens, is just the inevitable collapse of the subject under the pressure of endless self-production.
Now let's bring technology into the mix in Part 3, the digital panopticon. Back in the 18th century, Jeremy Bentham designed the panopticon. It was a prison concept where isolated inmates were watched by hidden guards, the ultimate model of forced surveillance. But contrast that with our reality today, the digital panopticon. We aren't isolated at all, we're hyper-connected, and we certainly aren't forced into surveillance. No, we enthusiastically upload our personal data, our sleep metrics, our locations, and our most intimate thoughts, entirely voluntarily. This creates what Han calls the transparency society. Our culture demands total, unfiltered visibility. But here's the catch. That demand actively destroys the hidden, quiet spaces that are totally necessary for genuine human relationships and inner growth. Mystery and interiority get eliminated. Trust gets entirely replaced by data and control, and our authentic selfhood is simply commodified into neat little data points for the market. And this leads us to a truly terrifying reality. In the digital age, freedom and surveillance have become practically indistinguishable. We willingly invite surveillance into our lives through smartwatches, tracking apps, and social media feeds, completely mistakenly believing that exposing ourselves equals empowerment. We have become both the inmates and the guards of our own digital prison.
So, how do we get out? Part 4, the rebellion of inactivity.
Han prescribes a radical return to the vita contemplativa, or the contemplative life. This is a state of sovereign unproductivity. It's all about prioritizing lingering, simply being, and deep reflection over any sort of measurable output. Han emphasizes that human beings absolutely require unstructured contemplation. This isn't some luxury reserved for a wellness retreat. It is a fundamental psychological necessity if you want a healthy human mind.
To access this contemplative life, we have to reclaim the power of deep boredom. This means actually embracing unstimulated time without instantly reaching for your phone. It means reclaiming the sovereign no to establish real boundaries. It means resting without a purpose. You have to refuse to treat your leisure time as just another opportunity to self-improve or acquire a new marketable skill.
Today, we treat boredom like a modern phobia, right? We rush to fill every single silent second with a podcast or scrolling a social media feed. But Han beautifully reframes boredom. He says it's not a negative at all. It's the absolute peak of mental relaxation. Just as sleep is the peak of physical relaxation, deep boredom is the incubator of true experience. It is the fertile ground where authentic thoughts, totally untouched by external demands, can finally take root.
Ultimately, you have to remember that the cure to burnout is absolutely not another productivity hack. Using a mindfulness app so that you can focus better at your corporate job, or scheduling a 15-minute power nap just to increase your afternoon output, that just turns rest into another form of optimized labor. The true cure is the radical power to not do. It's the capacity to intentionally leave a gap in your day that serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever. So, the next time you feel that itch to optimize a hobby, to track a bodily function on your watch, or to push through exhaustion in the name of the hustle, ask yourself this: are you genuinely optimizing your life? Or are you just efficiently optimizing your own exploitation? Thank you for watching this explainer. Remember, sometimes the most rebellious, powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing.
If you are sitting there right now and you're feeling just completely exhausted to your bones, I really want you to consider a rather terrifying possibility.
Yeah, a paradigm-shifting one, really.
Exactly. Because it's not because your boss is working you to death, and it's not because you have some flawed character or like terrible time management skills.
Right.
If we follow the logic of the philosopher we're looking at today, you are exhausted because society actually gave you way too much freedom.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive at first.
It really does. But the idea is that we've basically replaced the cruel boss, the one cracking the whip, with something infinitely more efficient. We replaced it with our own internal desire to optimize ourselves to death.
We were talking about a total rewiring of the human psyche here. Like, we've transitioned from an era where we were controlled by being told what we cannot do.
Right, the restriction.
To a hypermodern era where we are controlled by being told that we can do absolutely anything. And that specific shift, that is what has created this silent global epidemic of burnout.
And that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring the groundbreaking and honestly just mind-bending philosophy of the South Korean-born philosopher Byung-Chul Han.
He's incredibly insightful.
He really is. We're looking primarily at his seminal book, The Burnout Society, along with a few of his other, highly connected works that dive into this exact phenomenon.
Yeah, because we want to figure out why modern exhaustion isn't, it's not just a physical ailment, right?
No, not at all.
It's not a scheduling issue. It's a systemic psychological trap.
And so we are going to look at his central thesis, which is that we are no longer oppressed by external dictators, but by our own internal drive for achievement.
The sources we're working from today, they provide this incredibly rich, albeit, slightly dark lens through which to view our daily lives.
Very dark.
Yeah. Han maps out exactly how we moved from a culture of strict obedience to one of relentless self-optimization.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why I feel immensely guilty when I just sit on the couch to watch Netflix on a Sunday afternoon, we apparently have to look at the historical paradigm shift that got us here.
They do.
And the notes for this deep dive suggest that we cannot understand Byung-Chul Han without first understanding another philosopher, Michel Foucault.
Yes. Foucault is absolutely the essential starting point here.
I mean, I'm familiar with the name, obviously, but how does a 20th century French philosopher explain my modern anxiety?
Well, Han is basically building his entire theory as a direct response to Foucault's model of the world. He's taking Foucault's work and saying, yes, but we've moved past that.
Okay, so what was Foucault's model?
So Foucault spent a lot of his career analyzing what he called the disciplinary society. He mapped out the dominant social structure that ran the world, roughly from the 18th century all the way through the 20th century.
A huge chunk of modern history.
Exactly. And Foucault argued that society, during this massive stretch of history, was governed essentially by institutions of confinement.
Wait, when you say confinement, you mean literal physical walls?
Physical walls, strict borders, rigid schedules.
Yeah.
Yeah. Foucault looked at hospitals, madhouses, prisons, military barracks, and the traditional industrial factory.
Right.
And he noticed they all operated on the exact same logic.
Which was what?
They were all spaces designed to discipline the human body into obedience. The defining characteristic of this entire era was negativity. It was a world governed entirely by the word no.
Okay, so the operating verbs were should and should not. You should clock in when the factory whistle blows. You should not speak out of turn on the assembly line.
You should march in a straight line in the military barracks. Exactly.
That's the society of absolute boundaries, and they're enforced by an external authority. You have a boss, a warden, a teacher, a general.
And that external authority relies heavily on negative reinforcement.
Right, the punishment.
Yeah. If you deviate from the rules, if you step out of line, you are punished, either physically or economically.
You're fired, you're beaten.
Or, as Foucault pointed out, you were categorized by the state as a criminal or maybe a madman and locked away in a different kind of institution.
Just shuffled into another box.
Exactly. But the key here is that the power dynamic is entirely visible. You can look across the factory floor and clearly see the owner who is exploiting your labor. You can look at the watchtower and see the guard.
And because that oppression is external and visible, it gives you something concrete to push back against, right? I mean, you can form a labor union and go on strike.
Exactly.
You can organize a protest. You can rebel against the state. The friction is always between you and a system that is fundamentally outside of you.
Yes. But then Byung-Chul Han steps into the picture.
Right.
And he argues that Foucault's model, while it was totally historically accurate for the industrial age, is now completely obsolete.
Obsolete.
Yeah, Han says that the factory walls have basically come down.
Mm-hmm.
We do not live in a disciplinary society anymore. We live in a post-industrial world that he calls the achievement society.
The achievement society. Okay, I want to make sure I understand the actual mechanics of that shift. Because how exactly did we move from the factory floor to this new reality?
So Han connects this to the broader political and economic shift toward what is often called neoliberalism, mostly in the late 20th century.
Right. And just to be clear to you listening, we're not taking any political sides here. We're just impartially reporting on how these philosophers view the systems, trying to convey the ideas in the source material.
Absolutely. We're just looking at the cultural philosophy. So neoliberalism, in Han's framework, essentially means the deregulation of everything. And that includes the deregulation of the self.
Oh, interesting.
It's a system that removes structural barriers, it privatizes public goods, and it places the ultimate burden of success or failure entirely on the individual.
So it shifts the weight onto us.
Exactly. The social unconscious switched from the negativity of duty, like doing what you are told by a boss, to the absolute positivity of potential, doing everything you possibly can to maximize your own value.
Ah, I see. So in the Achievement Society, the linguistic signature changes. We completely drop the should and no, and we adopt a new defining modal verb.
Yes.
Can. Can. It is the society of can do.
And Han actually points to a very specific, famous political slogan to epitomize this era. He looks at Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign slogan.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
I mean, I remember how electric that felt at the time, but I have to push back here a little bit, or at least, like, play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
On its face, isn't yes, we can a profoundly good thing?
Sure, it sounds great.
Right. It sounds empowering. It feels like we're throwing off the chains of Foucault's prisons and those grim factories and stepping into a world where our potential is just limitless. It feels like pure freedom.
And it feels exactly like freedom. That's the trick. The brilliance of Han's critique is pointing out that this feeling of liberation is exactly what makes the Achievement Society so incredibly dangerous.
We don't realize we're trapped.
Exactly. He calls this the violence of positivity.
Hmm.
When society removes the external no, it replaces it with this boundless, suffocating demand for more.
You know, I was trying to wrap my head around how positivity could actually be violent, and I came up with an analogy. Tell me if this tracks with Han's philosophy.
Let's hear it.
Think about Foucault's disciplinary society like a strict enforced diet at a weight loss camp. You're told exactly what you can and cannot eat. No sugar, no carbs. You should eat this bowl of steamed broccoli. It's restrictive, it's deeply annoying, and it naturally makes you want to rebel.
Right, you want to sneak a candy bar in.
Exactly. You want to sneak a candy bar into your bunk just to stick it to the dietitian. You have these clear, visible limits to push against.
I see where you were going with this.
Right, so then you transition to the Achievement Society,
Sure.
The weight loss camp shuts down, and you walk into the world's most lavish, all-you-can-eat buffet. There are zero rules. No one is telling you what to eat.
Right.
In fact, the neon signs everywhere are flashing, eat everything, yes you can, discover your ultimate dining potential.
Yes.
You have absolute, unchecked freedom. But because there are no boundaries, you just gorge yourself. You eat until you are physically ill, until your body completely gives out.
Okay.
And the worst part is, as you're lying there sick to your stomach, you look around and realize there is no strict dietitian to blame. No external authority forced you to overeat. The only person you can possibly be angry at is yourself.
That analogy, I mean, that captures the mechanics of Han's thesis beautifully.
Yeah.
In the boundless buffet of the Achievement Society, the sheer abundance of possibility leads to a systemic obesity of the mind and spirit.
Systemic obesity, wow.
Yeah, you are not starved by restriction, you are saturated by excess.
Hmm.
And when you realize that you are the one holding the plate and choosing to keep eating, you arrive at the core trap of modern life.
Which is?
Han calls it voluntary self-exploitation.
The internal labor camp. Like,
Yeah.
we took the factory walls and literally rebuilt them inside our own heads.
That is exactly it. In the Achievement Society, the modern subject undergoes this terrifying transformation.
Right?
We are no longer the alienated, soot-covered factory worker toiling for some evil capitalist boss.
Right.
We become what Han calls the entrepreneur of the self.
The entrepreneur of the self.
Yeah, you view yourself not as a human being, but as a business entity. You are essentially the CEO of Me Incorporated.
Oh man, I see this everywhere. I mean, it is the absolute defining feature of modern hustle culture and the gig economy. Everything in our lives is metricized and optimized to increase our market value.
Everything.
We track our sleep cycles with smart rings so we can, recover faster to work harder the next day. We listen to deep dives and audiobooks at 1.5x speed so we can consume more data in less time.
Right, it's never fast enough.
And we take our weekend hobbies like baking or photography and immediately feel the pressure to monetize them into a side hustle. Like, nothing is allowed to just exist for its own sake anymore. Everything is a strategic development project.
And Han makes a chilling observation about this exact behavior. He notes that auto-exploitation, which is exploiting oneself, is infinitely more efficient for the economic system than allo-exploitation, which is being exploited by an external boss.
Okay, wait, why is it more efficient? Just because we don't realize it's happening?
Because it is accompanied by that illusion of freedom you mentioned earlier. Think about it. When someone else holds a physical whip over you, you eventually stop working.
Right, you get tired or angry.
Yeah, you stop out of spite or exhaustion, or you organize a revolt. But when you hold the whip yourself, You never stop.
Oh, wow.
You willingly work 70-hour weeks. You answer emails at midnight from your bed. You blur the boundaries between your professional and personal life until they are completely indistinguishable.
Because it's my brand.
Exactly. You do it all because you genuinely believe you are doing it for your personal growth, your brand, and your self-actualization.
You know, I was reading through the background materials, and there was a mention of the philosopher Hegel.
Ah, yes. Hegel.
It talked about his famous master-slave dynamic. And from what I understand, Hegel was describing the historical struggle between the conqueror and the conquered, right? Like two separate people fighting for recognition.
That's the classic Hegelian dialectic. Yes.
But Han is saying that in the Achievement Society, we have taken that entire brutal dynamic and crammed it into one brain.
Yes.
We are simultaneously the ruthless master cracking the whip and the exhausted slave pulling the weight, and we're existing in a single psychic space.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And internalizing the violence this way neutralizes any possibility of traditional resistance. From Han's perspective on late-stage capitalism, this is the ultimate triumph of the system.
How so?
Well, in classical Marxism, the workers can identify the factory owner, they can recognize the source of their exploitation, form solidarity with each other, and fight back. They can strike.
Right.
But in the Achievement Society, who exactly are you supposed to strike against? You cannot form a labor union against yourself.
You can't put yourself on a picket line?
Exactly. If you fail, or if you simply can't keep up with the endless demands to optimize, you do not blame the system. You blame yourself.
You think, I just didn't manage my time well enough. I wasn't resilient enough. I need to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and take ice baths.
Right. The economic structure remains completely unassailable because the violence it inflicts on you feels like self-improvement.
That is wild.
The author actually points to the creation of what he terms the silicon zombie.
Silicon zombie.
Yeah, we treat ourselves like hardware that constantly needs a software upgrade. We are desperate for the next patch that will make us more productive. And this requires absolutely zero external force from a government or a corporation, which makes it the most insidious mechanism for economic control ever devised.
One of the sources used a brilliant pop culture reference to illustrate this, and I loved it. They called it the Cool Hand Luke concept.
Oh, yeah.
In that classic movie, there is a notoriously cruel, bullying prison warden walking the yard, making the inmates' lives miserable.
Right.
Today, we don't have that warden walking outside of us. We all carry a nasty little prison warden inside our own skulls.
We really do.
He is constantly whispering, "Why are you resting? You could be learning to code right now. You could be networking on LinkedIn. You are falling behind."
And that internal warden never clocks out,
Hey.
which leads us to the inevitable biological and psychological consequence.
Right, because we are still biological creatures.
Exactly. What happens to the human engine when it is told that it has limitless potential, but it operates within a finite, mortal body? What happens when the friction never stops?
The engine catches fire, it burns out.
It burns out.
And because this limitless internal friction cannot result in an uprising in the streets, it results in a massive psychological collapse, which shifts our conversation directly into Han's fascinating view on modern mental health.
This is where his work gets deeply relevant to what people are experiencing right now. Han argues that every historical age has its signature afflictions. If we look back at the disciplinary society and the eras before it, we lived in what he calls an immunological era.
Meaning our primary threats were biological and external.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The entire paradigm of the world was structured around inside versus outside, or the self versus the foreign other. Diseases were bacterial or viral.
Right.
An outside invader like a virus breached the borders of the body, and the body's immune system mounted a violent defense to push the invader out. The threat was always a negative, foreign force trying to get in.
But Han says the immunological era is over. Today's mental health crises, the signature afflictions of the 21st century, operate on a completely different logic.
Yes.
We are talking about the explosive rise of depression, ADHD, burnout syndrome, and borderline personality disorder. Han calls these neuronal illnesses.
The crucial distinction Han makes here is that these modern neuronal sicknesses are not infections caused by a negative outside force. They are infarctions.
An infarction, like a myocardial infarction, a heart attack.
Exactly like a heart attack. An infarction is caused by a blockage,
Right.
an overload, an excess from within.
Right.
These mental illnesses are caused by an excess of positivity. It is that systemic obesity of the mind we talked about with the buffet. The psychic system is literally short-circuiting under the sheer volume of endless possibility endless stimulation, and the crushing weight of self-exploitation.
The brain literally cannot process the amount of yes being forced through its circuits.
Exactly.
You know, this connects to something else I saw in the notes. The sources bring in a French sociologist named Alain Ehrenberg.
Oh yes, his work on depression is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's written extensively about the history of depression, and he has this profound take that aligns perfectly with Han. He says that the depressed individual in the modern world is simply exhausted by the relentless mandate to become oneself.
That phrase is so key. Become oneself.
Right, because in the old disciplinary society, identity was largely assigned to you. You were a farmer, a blacksmith, a factory worker, a mother.
Your role was rigid, and your duties were clear.
Exactly. You might have been oppressed, but you knew exactly who you were and what was expected of you. Today, the only duty you have is to continually and repeatedly invent yourself from scratch.
You have to curate your personal brand every single day.
Yes. And Ehrenberg argues that depression is essentially a person's breaking point. It is the complaint that nothing is possible in a society that falsely and aggressively insists nothing is impossible.
It's the cognitive dissonance of that.
Exactly. When the culture screams, yes, you can, at you all day, every day, and you inevitably find that you actually cannot because you're tired or because human biology has limits or because you are constrained by massive economic inequality, the resulting dissonance crushes your psyche.
You collapse under the weight of your own idealized, impossible self.
It's tragic, honestly. But I want to make sure I am following the mechanics of this because it is a radical way to view mental health. Han is arguing that toxic positivity is not just annoying. It is literally a form of violence against the brain.
It is a systemic violence.
I can see how that leads to burnout and depression. But how does this violence of positivity lead to something like ADHD? Like, how does too much yes scatter our attention span?
Han addresses this by looking at how the achievement society has fundamentally altered human attention. To survive in a culture of endless productivity, we've basically had to abandon deep contemplative attention.
We replaced it with what?
We replaced it with a psychological state he calls hyperattention.
Hyperattention. I mean, it sounds like a superpower. It sounds like something a tech CEO would brag about having on a resume.
Right. It is marketed as a superpower, but Han argues it is actually severe evolutionary regression.
Regression? Why?
Because hyperattention is essentially the scattered, frantic, restless awareness of an animal in the wild. Think of a deer trying to eat in a dense forest.
Okay, a deer.
The deer is chewing its food, but its head is on a swivel. It is constantly scanning the tree line for wolves, listening for the sound of a snapping twig, keeping one eye on its offspring, and looking for a better food source, all at the same time.
It's completely keyed up.
Right. It has to constantly shift its focus in order to survive. The one thing the deer can never do is get lost in deep contemplative thought.
That is a staggering metaphor.
Yep.
So multitasking, which we put on our resumes as this highly evolved professional skill, is actually just biological survival mode.
That's exactly what it is. By losing our ability to focus deeply on a single thing because we are constantly swiping between tabs, checking emails, producing content, consuming data, we regress from the heights of human thought back to a state of animalistic distraction.
Wow.
Han points out that true cultural achievements, things like philosophy, fine art, deep human intimacy, they require a high tolerance for boredom and the ability to maintain unbroken, deep attention.
And the violence of positivity shatters that.
The constant demand to interact and produce shatters that attention into a million frantic fragments.
So we are all just deer in the woods, but instead of scanning the tree line for wolves, we are scanning our screens for Slack notifications, text messages, and Instagram likes.
Precisely. And if our brains are scattering into a million pieces like a deer in the woods, we have to ask, where exactly is the woods? Where are we spending all this frantic energy? Where do we voluntarily display our self-exploitation for the entire world to grade and evaluate?
Well, it's happening almost entirely on our screens. The internet, social media, the smartphone, which introduces one of the most compelling concepts from the sources Han's theory of the digital panopticon.
To really grasp the horror of the digital panopticon, we have to do a quick dive into the original panopticon.
Let's do it.
The concept was created by Jeremy Bentham, who was an 18th century English philosopher and social reformer. Bentham designed this theoretical, hyper-efficient prison model.
This was the architectural model that Foucault was obsessed with, right? He used it as the ultimate symbol of the disciplinary society.
Yes. Foucault saw Bentham's prison as the perfect metaphor for how power operated. The panopticon is a circular building. The inmates' cells are arranged in a ring along the outer wall.
Okay, picture a circle of cells.
Right. And in the very center of the ring is a single watchtower. The guard in the tower has bright lights shining outward, meaning he can see into any cell at any given moment. But the inmates cannot see into the tower.
Oh, that's deeply creepy. So the prisoner never knows for sure if the guard is looking at them in that specific second.
Exactly. Because they might be watched at any given moment, the inmates are forced to assume they're always being watched.
That's brilliant, in an evil way.
The genius of the panopticon is entirely psychological. The inmates eventually internalize the gaze of the guard. They start policing their own behavior out of fear, even if the watchtower is completely empty.
They become their own guards.
Right. The physical walls isolate them from each other, and they are controlled entirely by the threat of unseen surveillance.
It's forced visibility through physical isolation. But Han argues that today we have built a digital panopticon, and there is a deeply unsettling twist here.
What's the twist?
We are willing, enthusiastic prisoners. We aren't locked in these cells by a state apparatus. We built the prison ourselves, and we actively love being inside it.
That is the truly terrifying part. In the digital age, we carry our own tracking devices voluntarily. Our smartphones are the bars of the cell.
The language Han uses here is so striking. He calls the smartphone a mobile confessional.
A mobile confessional, yes.
He says platforms like Facebook, X, or Instagram operate as the global church of the digital. We are constantly confessing our inner lives to the algorithm.
Without anyone even asking us to.
Exactly. We upload our desires, our geographic locations, our political thoughts, our purchases.
And the inversion of Bentham's original prison is what makes this so insidious. In the 18th century panopticon, visibility was a punishment. It was forced upon isolated inmates to strip them of their autonomy.
But now,
in the digital panopticon, visibility is the ultimate desire. We actively fear not being seen. We beg the watchtower to look at us. We beg the algorithm for visibility.
we optimize our posts with hashtags to ensure the watchtower is looking at us.
Exactly.
You know, I was struck by the example in the sources regarding the smart home. It is the perfect illustration of this voluntary surrender.
Oh, the smart home is a prime example.
Think about the modern smart vacuum cleaner. It is marketed to us as the ultimate convenience. It cleans your floors automatically so you have more time to hustle or relax.
Right, it saves you time.
But while it is vacuuming, it is using lasers and cameras to map the exact square footage and architectural layout of your private home, and it's sending that data to a corporate server.
It's literally mapping your private space.
And we buy smart beds that track our tossing and turning while we sleep, monitoring our heart rates and uploading our biometric data to the cloud. We pay hundreds of dollars to install internet-connected surveillance cameras in our living rooms and nurseries.
We are funding our own surveillance. It is presented as a luxury, but it fundamentally annihilates the private sphere.
It completely destroys it.
And Han connects this massive data harvesting to his critique of the modern obsession with transparency. Today, there is a totalizing cultural demand that absolutely everything be transparent, visible, measurable, and shared.
Right. Politicians demand transparency, corporations preach transparency, and we demand it of each other.
But Han argues that transparency is actually a violent ideology.
Okay, I struggled with Han's take on transparency when I first read it, because usually we demand transparency as a form of honesty and accountability. It's seen as a moral good. How can honesty be violent? Is he just talking about the loss of privacy, or is it deeper than that?
It is much deeper than privacy. Han argues that transparency destroys genuine human mystery, trust, and intimacy.
How does it destroy trust?
Think about the concept of trust. Trust is only required in a state between knowledge and ignorance. If you know absolutely everything about a person, if their entire life, their thoughts, and their movements are reduced to transparent data, you do not need to trust them.
Because you just have total control over them.
Exactly. There's a quote from the text that hit me hard. Only what is dead is transparent.
Only what is dead is transparent.
Wow. Human life is inherently complex, contradictory, messy, and hidden. To make a human being completely transparent, you have to flatten them out. You have to strip away the nuance and turn a complex soul into predictable, readable data points.
And Han discusses this deeply in relation to romantic love, right? What he calls eros.
The agony of eros, yes.
But how does transparency destroy love?
Well, love requires hiddenness. It requires alterity, which is a philosophical term, meaning the absolute otherness of another person.
Alterity.
The otherness. Genuine love is an encounter with a mystery that you cannot fully grasp, predict, or control. It is standing before a person who is fundamentally separate from you. But the digital world, driven by algorithms and the demand for transparency, eliminates the other.
This makes perfect sense when you look at modern dating apps like Tinder or Hinge. You are swiping through human beings who have been reduced to highly consumable images and metrics.
Right, their age, height, job title, a few carefully curated photos.
It is the absolute enforcement of transparency for the sake of frictionless efficiency.
And in doing so, it destroys the very possibility of a genuine erotic encounter with the unknown. The algorithm doesn't want you to encounter the terrifying, beautiful mystery of the other. It wants to show you mirrors of yourself.
Right, it curates people who fit your exact customized preferences and political views. We end up consuming human relationships the exact same way we consume products on Amazon.
And we surrender all of this intimate data, our dating preferences, our sleep cycles, the layout of our homes, our deepest fears for what?
We trade it for dopamine hits, we trade it for a little red notification bubble.
Han terms this system psychopolitics. It is the natural evolution of Foucault's idea of biopolitics.
Can you explain biopolitics quickly for context?
Sure. Biopolitics was Foucault's term for how modern states control the physical bodies of massive populations, managing birth rates, public health, housing, hygiene.
Right, controlling the biology.
But Han says the system has moved past the physical body. Psychopolitics is the control of the mind, the emotions, and the desires.
So instead of disciplining the body through force, the system programs the psyche through pleasure.
Exactly. Surveillance in the digital age operates entirely through seduction. We are not tortured in dark interrogation rooms to give up our confessions. We volunteer them happily for digital validation.
Just true.
Big data, algorithmic tracking, and tech corporations use our own desires to manipulate our behavior, predict our purchasing habits, and keep us endlessly engaged. We are controlled by what we want.
It is the perfect, inescapable prison. It is a prison where the inmates brag about the view from their cells and compete for the most comfortable shackles.
That's exactly what it is.
Let's take a breath and try to synthesize the sheer weight of all this. Because if our professional lives are a trap of voluntary self-exploitation where we act as our own ruthless bosses and our social and inner lives are trapped in a voluntary digital panopticon where we willingly surrender our mystery for dopamine, how in the world do we break free? Are we just doomed to be exhausted, transparent data points until we die?
This is the turning point in Han's philosophy. He pivots from diagnosing the disease to prescribing a cure.
Okay, good. We need a cure.
But his prescription is just as countercultural and, frankly, just as difficult to swallow as his critique. Han argues that our standard modern solutions to burnout are actually making the problem worse.
Wait, really? What do you mean?
Productivity hacks, time management apps, and scheduled self-care will not save us.
Why not? I mean, I rely on scheduling apps to keep my head above water. Why is self-care a bad thing?
Because in the Achievement Society, we have turned leisure and self-care into just another optimized task.
Oh, no.
If you are scheduling a strict 15-minute mindfulness session on a meditation app, and your goal is simply to lower your cortisol levels so that you can go back to answering emails more efficiently, you are not actually resting.
I'm just doing mechanical maintenance on the machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are instrumentalizing your relaxation to serve the ultimate goal of the Achievement Society.
I feel incredibly called out right now, but you are completely right. We totally gamify our own relaxation. I know people who wear fitness watches that give them a sleep score out of 100 every morning.
Yes.
They literally wake up stressed out about whether they succeeded or failed at sleeping. It is completely absurd when you say it out loud.
The genuine cure, according to Han, requires stepping outside the logic of the Achievement Society altogether. He argues we must reclaim what he calls the vita contemplativa, the contemplative life.
The vita contemplativa, that sounds ancient. Where does that concept come from?
That goes all the way back to the foundations of Western philosophy, specifically to Aristotle.
Okay, Aristotle.
Aristotle categorized human existence into two realms. The vita activa, which is the active life of work, politics, and labor.
Right.
And the vita contemplativa, the life of the mind, observation, and stillness. And Aristotle actually believed that the contemplative life was far superior to the active life.
That feels completely alien to how we think today.
Totally alien, because for the ancient Greeks, work and labor were driven by sheer necessity. Work was what you had to do simply to survive, to put food on the table.
It wasn't your identity.
No, not at all. But contemplation, philosophy, sitting in silence, appreciating art. These things were ends in themselves. They had no utilitarian purpose. They did not produce a product.
Yeah.
Therefore, they were the ultimate expression of human freedom.
And we have completely inverted that hierarchy. Today, the vita activa, our work, our hustle, is our religion. It is our primary source of identity and meaning.
Think about when you meet a stranger at a party. The very first question you ask them is, what do you do for a living?
Every single time, we measure a person's worth by their output. And leisure, the contemplative life, is only viewed as valuable if it recharges our batteries for more work.
Exactly. To escape the machinery of the Achievement Society, Han says we must actively reclaim the sovereign no. We have to rediscover the radical, almost rebellious power to not do anything.
And this brings us to one of the most challenging concepts in the entire stack of sources, Han's advocacy for the power of deep boredom.
Profound boredom. It is the absolute antithesis of hyperattention.
The sources reference the cultural critic Walter Benjamin, who had this beautiful, poetic description of deep boredom. He called it the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience.
It's a wonderful quote.
The idea is that if sleep is the absolute peak of physical relaxation, deep boredom is the absolute peak of mental relaxation.
Yes, it is the necessary fertile soil for genuine creativity, insight, and self-discovery.
Because when you are in a state of hyperattention, when you are the deer in the woods constantly reacting to notifications, emails, and stimuli, your brain never has the empty space required to wander.
It cannot generate original thought or synthesize complex, disparate ideas, but when you endure the emptiness of unstimulated time, a different kind of cognitive processing takes over. A deep, lingering, meaningful attention emerges.
Here's where the philosophy hits the pavement for me, and I think for a lot of people listening to this deep dive, how do you tell the average person who has a mortgage to pay, a demanding boss, kids who need to be fed, and a smartphone buzzing in their pocket with urgent texts to just sit down, be bored, and practice sovereign unproductivity? Doesn't this vita contemplativa sound like a massive luxury reserved for academics and the wealthy?
That is the most vital, practical question we can ask. And it is important to clarify that Han is not suggesting that we all quit our jobs, throw our phones in the ocean, move to a cabin in the woods, and stare at a wall forever.
Right, because that's just impossible.
That is not practical for 99% of humanity, and honestly, it misses the point of how modern power operates. We cannot completely withdraw from the digital or economic world without completely marginalizing ourselves and our families.
So what does reclaiming the no actually look like on, say, a Tuesday afternoon?
It looks like cultivating an aesthetic of resistance in your everyday, ordinary life. It is about aggressively creating internal boundaries and carving out small spaces of pure uselessness.
Pure uselessness.
Yes. Think about taking a walk around your neighborhood. Reclaiming the contemplative life means taking that walk without your smartphone in your hand and taking off the smartwatch that is tracking your steps and heart rate. You walk simply to walk, not to close your digital fitness rings.
It's reading a fiction novel on the couch not because you're trying to level up your empathy skills for corporate leadership, but simply to inhabit another world for an hour.
It is the radical act of sitting in a chair on a Sunday afternoon, doing absolutely nothing productive, and violently refusing to feel guilty about it. It is the refusal to let the system metricize every single second of your existence.
But doing that is incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, when you first sit in silence without your phone, your brain panics.
It will absolutely panic. Your brain will scream for a screen.
Yeah.
It will demand a task to complete or a dopamine hit to consume.
It really does.
That panic, that intense discomfort, is literally the withdrawal symptom of the Achievement Society. You are detoxing from the violence of positivity.
Wow, withdrawal symptoms.
But Han argues that if you can sit through that panic, if you can endure the profound boredom, you reclaim a piece of your humanity that the economic system cannot touch, cannot track, and cannot monetize.
The sources make a chilling point about the macro-level stakes of this, actually. They mention that if we do not incorporate the vita contemplativa back into our culture, the active life just degenerates into mindless hyperactivity.
Yes.
And that culminates in total burnout, not just for our own individual psyches, but for the entire planet.
We can scale Han's philosophy up to the global level easily. The exact same psychological mindset that tells an individual to infinitely exploit their own body and mind for endless growth is the mindset that tells society to infinitely exploit the Earth's natural resources.
Right. It is the demand for more production, more growth, more extraction, completely ignoring the natural limits of the biological world.
A society that is fundamentally incapable of saying no. A society that refuses to recognize natural limits or the necessity of rest will simply consume itself and its environment until the engine seizes and the whole thing collapses.
That is the ultimate trajectory of the violence of positivity, which means that choosing to sit still, choosing to be intentionally unproductive, choosing to let a moment pass without extracting some kind of tangible value from it, it is not laziness.
No, not at all.
According to Han's framework, it is a profound act of political, ecological, and spiritual resistance.
It is the only way to recover our capacity for truth, for beauty, and for genuine, mysterious connection with other human beings.
We have to be willing to step out of the glaring, transparent neon light of the digital panopticon. We have to allow ourselves and the people we love the grace of shadow, of mystery, and of not needing to be constantly evaluated by an algorithm.
We have to remember how to close our eyes.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this deep dive right now? Let's bring this all the way home. If you are driving your commute, or folding laundry, or sitting at a desk feeling a bone-deep, heavy exhaustion that a full night of sleep never seems to cure, Han's message is a radical reframing of your reality.
It really is.
It is not because you are fundamentally flawed. It is not because you are not trying hard enough, or because you lack corporate resilience, or because you failed to optimize your morning routine.
Your exhaustion is a perfectly logical biological response to a profoundly unnatural system.
You are operating inside a cultural machine that demands infinite, boundless output from a finite, mortal human being. You have internalized a ruthless master who demands constant optimization, and you are living in a digital prison that demands constant, exhausting visibility. Your inherent worth as a human being is not measured by your digital transparency, your engagement metrics, your side hustles, or your endless achievements.
This leaves us with a massive paradigm-shifting question to mull over as we close today.
Let's hear it.
Han teaches us that power today does not force us, it seduces us. It rules through the positivity of yes, not the negativity of no. But if our ultimate radical rebellion is the power to say no, to flatly refuse constant optimization, and to sit in deep, profound boredom, what happens to the global economic machine if millions of people wake up tomorrow and simultaneously decide that their primary goal in life is simply to be rather than to achieve? Does the entire system of hypercapitalism grind to a halt and collapse, or does humanity finally evolve into something truly remarkably free?
That is the philosophical mystery we are left to navigate. When we look at modern exhaustion, the X-ray does not show a broken bone, it shows a broken cultural paradigm. And the cure is not a prescription or a productivity hack, it is a profound, unapologetic, sovereign pause. We invite you to take a deep, entirely unproductive breath today. Just exist for a minute. The world will not end if you do. We will catch you on the next deep dive.